Thank you. WCTC News Talk time is 2:08. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another round of Commie Pinko Atheist, baby-killing, criminal-coddling, bleeding heart, bedwetting, fornicating, Satanist, race-mixing, pervert radio. It's Tuesday, January the 17th. It is, of course, the 17th day of the year. We have 348 days to go. You have 342 days left to do your Christmas shopping. It is the...
Gotcha. That was the face behind the voice of Bob Aaronson, popular radio talk show host on WCTC. Hi, I'm Dolly Vasta, and welcome back once again to For Art's Sake. Now, Bob, your show is on Monday through Friday, 2 to 6 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to answer a question that you asked me when I was on your show 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
And you said to me, why me? Meaning, why did I ask you to come on the show? And the answer is this. People really like to know, A, who is the face behind the voice that they tune into all the time? And what makes this face and voice tick? So, who is Bob Aaronson?
Wait a second, I'll look in my wallet and see if I can find some identification for you. I recognize the desire to know what people look like. They say, there's a saying in the industry, you have a great face for radio. Meaning obviously it's a face you should keep hidden. But there is a curiosity about what people look like, and it's two-way. Because obviously people call me, I have a relationship with the callers, and I don't know what they look like. So we obviated that a couple of weeks ago. We had a bunch of callers come in and co-host the show, and I must admit that a significant part of why I did that was so that I could find out what these people look like, who call me. So it works both ways. And for better or for worse, I'm delighted to be able to satisfy the curiosity about what I look like. Now I've done that, I can go home.
No, you can't.
Okay. You want my life story?
Well,
if I were famous, it would be a pretty good life story.
You said you had a great story to tell me when I was at the
Well,
station.
how far back do you want to take it? I was in high school. I was a sophomore.
Let's see, we have 28
I'll talk fast. I was a sophomore in high school. A girl who was a year ahead of me in class, so she would have been a junior, but light years ahead of me in attainment. I mean, I worshiped this girl. I had such a crush on her, you wouldn't believe. And I didn't think she knew who I was. And she came up to me one day and said, and we shared a class. I don't remember what class it was, but she came up to me and she said, you know, you have the most beautiful voice I've ever. And I said, well, right then and there. I mean, that was when my career was set. I decided that somehow I was going to make a living with this voice. And I was, when I got out of college, I was a disc jockey. And I loved being a disc jockey. You know, I could play music and say outrageous things. And it was fun. And we went to, my first job was in Kentucky, and because that's what everybody, that was the conventional wisdom. You go way out of town, you find a little station, you make all your mistakes, you polish your craft, and then you start working your way back toward bigger markets. And I'd worked my way back as far as Philadelphia. And two things happened within a month of each other. My wife had a baby, and I got fired. Now, getting fired in radio is not all that uncommon. It happens all the time. And I've been at WCTC now for 3 years, which is, I mean, that's a darn good run. I'm looking for many more years.
Yes,
but, you know,
yes.
but it's stability is not a thing you search for in this business. So I got fired. And I said, do I really want to raise my family by bouncing around the country to different radio stations? And the answer I gave to myself was no. So my wife and the new baby and packed up and we went back to New York, which was home base for us. And I worked for a very, very long time raising my family in a series of jobs that I really did not like. And I was becoming increasingly unhappy. And you know, that kind of internal happiness, you can't put a drop of poison water in the well and say, well, the rest of the well is okay, it's that one drop, it just permeates everything. And I was becoming increasingly unhappy. What makes me tick? Why do I do radio, which is the subtext beyond the question? You'll find out from this story that the real answer is, I can't do very much else. I mean, that's really what I'm suited for. And I was beginning to realize that. And my wife, who had been a school teacher, had been, for the master's increment, you know, the additional money you get when you have a master's degree, was going back to school to get her master's in math education. And she wasn't doing it very seriously. She'd take one course at a time at night, and then she'd go back to take the follow-up course to that one course and find out that it wasn't given. So she'd have to take another course that would substitute for it. So after a number of years, she finally wound up with a master's degree in computer science. And she said, I wonder how much money I could make in industry. So she quit teaching, went into industry. These were the boom years. And all of a sudden, she wound up making very, very serious money, a lot more money than she ever would have made as a teacher. And she said to me one day, how much money would you make if you went back into radio? And I said, if I got real lucky, probably $11,000 a year. And she said, I won't tell you what she said because you'd have to censor it. She said, bleep it, do it. And I said, why not? And so I did it. I sent out letters to a bunch of radio stations, every radio station I could find within a 50-mile radius of my home. And I said, I can write news, I can host music shows, I could probably do a talk show if somebody asked me. And I wound up being a newscaster for a radio station in Sussex County. And then just started working on the career. And have done in terms of, I can tell you, financially, I'm doing okay. In terms of career, I'm doing okay. I'm very happy at what I'm doing, and I've never looked back. And I'm grateful to her for the opportunity, and I'm grateful to God or whatever for giving me the talent to carry it out. And at this ripe old age, I find myself in a relative, I've been back in broadcasting for 10 years now, and I've never had a second thought about the wisdom of doing it. I've loved every minute of it, and still continue to do so.
Well, you know, the sound is in your voice that you love it. I believe wholeheartedly that there is a sound in people's voices. Now, when you can't see them, you can hear it.
Oh, sure. Somebody just said that.
And if your ear is tuned to this, and I listen to what people say to me, so you can always pick up if there is just a trickle of unhappiness in what they're saying. And I have never heard it with you.
Well, you'll hear it. I mean, there are days that I don't,
Oh,
like
well,
any
all
other
right,
job, there are days that I
yeah.
don't want to go to work, just like everybody else. But you go and you get into it and you get through it. And one of the things about being a professional is that there's a level. I once heard Buddy Rich on I think on the Johnny Carson show, who'd been playing drums for 1,000 years, and Carson said to him, you ever have an off night? And he said, oh, I have a lot of off nights. You'll never know it, because there's a level below which I'm not going to let myself go.
Right.
And that's how I feel. I mean, unless I'm, if I've got a 104 fever and I'm down with the flu, or I've got, one day last year I had laryngitis, absolutely could not talk, never had that before in my life. But there's one part of being a professional is that you maintain a certain level and you try not to let those days get through. There's days I'll make fun of myself sometimes because I don't feel like going to work. But I start thinking about all those years that I worked in jobs that I really, really did not like, and was doing something that I really, really did not believe in, and I think to myself, how lucky am I? And the answer is very lucky, very lucky.
Well, this is the reason I do this, because I really totally enjoy it, and the people who sit where you're sitting, or actually, I made this improvement.
Yes, you did, and I'm sitting in the host chair and you're sitting in the guest chair.
I usually sit there.
Because from this side I look pretty good. From this side I look like a troll, and so I want
and
people
God
to
knows
understand
what
that.
I look like today on this
You
this
look
side.
terrific.
But it's okay, because you are the guest. Now, when we were at the show, you really have an interesting concept for your show. And you don't really, you kind of pick whatever comes out of the newspapers, and people call in, and you really get some interesting people. You also get some strange ones.
Sure. Well, I mean, anybody with a telephone can be, it's the wonderful thing about talk radio. It really is democratization. Anybody can pick up the phone. We don't ask what their qualifications are. We don't ask to see a degree. They don't show us a resume. All they have to have is a phone and the ability to dial 545 WCTC, if you don't mind me plugging the radio station.
No, don't be silly.
And they come on, and one of the things, I mean, talk radio has become kind of characterized by the extreme right-wing faction of talk radio, and it's very vocal, it's very powerful, and in some sense it is fair to characterize talk radio as that, because the mega hosts, the big stars, are right-wing conservatives who hang up on people, who yell at people, who insult people, who make fun. I don't do that. Maybe I should. I'd probably make a lot more money. I'd be a lot bigger star. But, you were talking about radio and revealing the sound of your voice. I really believe that you can't be anything other than who you are on the radio, and that comes through. Because there is nothing getting in it. There's no lens. There's no glass screen that separates the viewer. There's no spatial difference. When you look at a television set, it's compressed in size. It's two-dimensional rather than three. So it's an impression of reality, but it's not reality. You talk on the radio, there's nothing between you and the listener. sound of your voice comes in. And you, if you're, I mean, I could fool people for 15 minutes. I could pretend to be anything I wanted to. But I'm on the air for 20 hours a week. You can't fool people for 20 hours a week. Who you are, what you are, comes through.
Okay. I want to take a teeny tiny break because we have one of your phone callers.
Okay.
All right? So we'll just stop for a couple of minutes and listen to that.
All of that is coming up, plus your phone calls at 545-WCTC, 545-9282. Like thus wise. Hello, Frank Apisa.
Hey, man, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing real good. Beautiful day out here.
Well, it's about time, don't you think?
It is a beautiful day.
I really thought the sky had been painted gray. But yes, it's blue indeed today. What's up?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, I heard you talking about that gas, and while I hardly ever get sick, and I am not a hypochondriac of any way, shape, or form, but when I was there the other day, I told you I've been having, I had a cough for like 2 months, and so many people have, ascribed my condition to the fact that oxygenated fuel causes people to cough, that I thought I just would mention it as a, as a.
Well, you should have held off your call and called the Arco guy, but.
Yeah, no.
I'll mention
I wanted to talk about a couple other things. I want your opinion on something.
Okay.
One of the things I want your opinion on was the Star Trek thing.
I didn't see it.
You didn't?
I didn't see it. I didn't get home last night in time. I wound up, something else came up very late, and I had every plan to go home. As I told you, the Times came with, the New York Times came yesterday with free popcorn courtesy of this new Paramount network, and it said on the package, sit down and watch, and we invite you to eat the popcorn while you're watching the premiere of Star Trek. And I was all set to do that, and I didn't see it. Reports are that it's very, very good. I mean, the reviews yesterday in the papers were that it was terrific.
Well, I did watch it. I saw some things that I'm not nuts about, but I'm really more interested in your opinion because really, my taste is in my tongue.
I'll tell you the truth. I got home late last night, and I wanted to make sure that I videotaped it, so I rewound the videotape and saw the beginning of the show, which came up on a black screen studded with stars, and then letters in a crawl came up with a historical background. It said, in the outer edges of the galaxy, this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And then all of a sudden, the spaceship zoomed across the screen, and another one following it, firing upon it. And I said, wait a minute. I've seen this before. This is the opening of Star Wars.
Star Wars.
I mean, it was I haven't seen enough of it to know whether it was a reverential homage or a ripoff.
Yeah.
And my suspicion is that at this point, it's a ripoff.
In the 12 years I've been taping, Bob, I have had the gamut of guests, and I'm sure you have too. Does anybody, you don't have to name names, but I'll tell you a funny story if you'll tell me. You start first and then I'll tell you.
Well, I've been fortunate. I've never had any really, really, really bad guests. I can tell you that one time, not at WCTC, but I used to do a national program on the ABC radio network, and that's kind of what led to my involvement at CTC, because one of the program directors of one of the stations that took my show, when that project was folded by the network, and I was now, actors say between engagements, I was freelancing for a year. Actually, it was a pretty good year, but I was freelancing, and then one of the program directors of a radio station in Buffalo, which carried my ABC network overnight show, came to WCTC. He was the program director here, and he called me and said, we'd love to have you here if you'd consider working at a local station. Well, after a year, I was saying, oh, sure. And that program director is gone, but I've been fortunate enough to hang on. But anyway, I was doing the overnight show on ABC, and it ran in New York from 3 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock in the morning. That's physically when I did the show. And that's because it had started out as a California show. It was on from midnight to 3. Long story. But I interviewed Bob Dornan one time, the conservative congressman, and we had set this up, and he'd agreed, and clearly I had awakened him. I mean, he had forgotten all about this, and he got on the phone, and we talked for about maybe 15 or 20 seconds. And I said, well, Congressman Dornan, it's been nice having you on the air. And he said, oh, it's been good. And that was the end of that. That was the end of the interview. I interviewed here at WCTC. We used to interview comedians, and I used to interview comedians on a regular basis. And I thought, gee, that would be fun, a Friday afternoon. We'll have a comic on. I found out that it was a roll of the dice, and the odds were about 50%. Half the time, well, not quite 50%. A goodly proportion of the time, comedians are not known for being responsible people. So a goodly percentage of the time, they forgot about the interview and they never showed up, or they weren't in the rooms where we were supposed to be calling them. The other times, they weren't funny. They weren't amusing. They weren't entertaining. They simply didn't realize that they were supposed to come on the air and bring something with them, do something. And I would ask them a question, they'd give me an answer. How long you been in the show? How long you been in the business? Oh, about 5 years.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Now you're pulling.
Yeah. So, and I'm a good interviewer. I mean, that's
Yes, you are.
that's what I
Yes, you
do
are.
best, and I can always make a creditable interview out of it. But I found it was more work than it was worth. Some interviews, some comedians were terrific. I mean, I had Gilbert Gottfried on. I said, "Hello, Gilbert," and then for 30 minutes I sat and laughed, and he did all the work. He was terrific.
I love doing shows like
I had Dennis Wolfberg on once, and he was appearing at a club locally, and I guess as part of the deal, appearing at the club owner said, "Promote your appearance, you're going to go on this show." And he came on, it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I guess that's early in the day for a comedian. Dennis Wolfberg, I don't know if you know him, very, very funny man, won all kinds of awards, pop-eyed, very, very literate comedian, had been a school teacher, you know who I mean? And I had him on, and he clearly did not want to be there. And he was giving me monosyllabic answers and wasn't reacting and wasn't saying anything funny. And I took, it was supposed to be a half-hour interview, and after 15 minutes I went to my first commercial break, and I thanked him for his time, and I cut the interview short. He died 2 months later of cancer, a cancer which he had been fighting for a number of years. And so he must have known that terrible things were happening to him, and clearly he thought life is too short to be spending with this bozo on the radio. And I understood that then, and I felt real badly. I mean, I felt badly about having the guy on and imposing on his time.
either that or he had been undergoing chemotherapy.
Whatever,
and
yeah,
just ill.
yeah, sure. A lot of things could happen. But I remember being really, at the time of the interview, saying, boy, this is one of the most disappointing interviews I've ever done in my life. And then when the guy died, just a couple of months after that, I said, well, I guess under the circumstances, it was a pretty good interview.
Yes, yes.
So those are my, I also had one, there was a sculptor I had on a television show once, because I do what you do. In another community, I have a little, I don't mean to disparage the show, but it's a little cable operation, and I do a little cable show that I do as a favor for a friend. And I come in once a month. We do 4 half-hour shows in the space of 2.5 hours. So you can see there's a lot of thought and preparation that goes into it. And I never knew who the guests are until I get there. So I walked in one day, and there was a sculptor. The town that hosts the show was going to put up this sculpture in a public park. And this guy had a small model of it, and he was there to tell me about this sculpture. And he had breath. I can't imagine that the stainless steel that this model was made out of didn't simply melt down. And I kept smiling. Yeah, and I kept smiling through this thing, and I could not wait for it to be over. I mean, it was awful, just awful. So now tell me your funny story.
Oh, well, this was many years ago, and Dave was not the director of the show then, but somebody had said to me, there's this, great guest, you just have to interview him. He was an artist, and I said, okay, but I'd really like to talk to him first. I get leery of people who say they know someone who's so great. So I met him for lunch, and we had a great conversation. He was witty, and I thought, he's perfect. So the show was about 2 days later, and he comes on the show, and I walk in, and Chuck says to me, who was the director then, Dolly, have you seen his work? And I said, no. He said, go take a look at it. And he had pictures lined up all across the front here. And I looked, it was a complete collection of erotica.
Stuff that he created.
That he created. And I'm thinking, oh God, the show is new. The show is new. I know this is cable, but I'll never make it past the show. So I said to Chuck, well, let's slide all the ones in front that are the least erotica and do some fast panning back and forth and back and forth. And I'll try and keep him off the subject of show, of picture by picture. Well, that was okay. But from this witty conversationalist, this was a man who also lectured at a college, and he became the most absolute drone I have ever heard in my life. 28 minutes of drone. I must have done my grocery list mentally, what I had to do the next day mentally. It was incredible.
Yeah.
But
I've been fortunate. I haven't had a lot of that.
well, he was one of the few, and in 12 years, you really can't complain. But we have another piece. We were talking about the arts, and you just spoke of your arts activities. You had asked me a question. So up there, up at your studio.
I'm going to ask you another one. Whose art?
Whose art?
Never mind.
I'll tell you later, because I have to get this piece in.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. And we were talking about the arts and funding, and I'd like to lead that into the conversation that we had at the studio.
Fair enough. But if we're gonna concern ourselves with quality of life issues, and if we're going to concern ourselves with the idea of a functioning democracy where people are expected to make decisions and be able to understand fine points of reasoning and able to take part in a discussion that may preclude the obvious or go beyond the obvious, then you got to school kids in the arts. You got to school them in literature. You got to school them in music. You got to school them in all of these disciplines that teach them and everybody to appreciate what the purpose of all of this is. You know, it's not simply to conserve money. The function of government is not to conserve money, although it should do that. But what it should do is promote quality of life for the citizens living under its aegis. I mean, I think that's part of it. I might get some arguments on that from people, but that seems to me an integral part of the thing. And arts, by definition, are not going to turn a profit. And somebody's got to subsidize them, and somebody always has. They've never been profitable. One time the arts depended on wealthy patrons, or it depended upon the church, or it depended on something. And I think it's a legitimate function of government to subsidize and fund things which may not attract a wide commercial audience. Because if that's what we're about, you know, then the whole world is going to turn into Madonna. And Friday the 13th movies, one after the other.
That's a frightening thought.
Well, I mean, that's what it is. It's you know, to equate value and intrinsic worth with commercial viability is to travel down a very, very dangerous path. And that's what people are saying. Let's put the arts out there, and if they make money, they make money, and if they don't make money, they don't make money. It's not government's role to subsidize it. Well, it is government's role to subsidize it. I firmly, firmly believe that. And when people talk about, I don't want my tax money going to fund, and then they'll pick out, you know, one little, one particular artist or one piece of work that they don't agree with, either philosophically or morally or something, and they'll hinge the whole argument on that and say, I don't want my tax money funding dirty pictures. Well, I don't want my tax money funding stealth bombers, but you don't get to pick and choose how every penny of your dollars are going to be spent. And for my money, I mean, I'd rather have my money funding the arts any day in the week than funding orange shipments to some far-off country to continue to fight a revolution. You've been doing For Art's Sake for 12 years?
Started in '82.
And you've won 10 awards.
Mm-hmm.
What's next?
What is next?
And why me?
And
what
why
do
you?
you expect to get out of me when we get on the
Do
show?
you know, because I enjoy your show. I mean, this is no bull. I really do. I wake up with CTC in the morning. And, but I listen to you in the afternoon. And I always wanted to call. There were a lot of things, and I always said, oh, it's dumb to call. I won't call.
No, it's not dumb to call. That's one of the I'm glad you brought it up so I can say it's not dumb to call.
I know it's not.
I wish people would call more. And I wish people would get over that. So that I get the sense that there's a lot of people out there who would like to call and feel that it's dumb to call. It's not. It's one of the reasons I had all my regular callers in on Friday, because they're bright, sharp, articulate people, and I wanted to get that sense of them across.
Well, when I heard about Christy, I couldn't wait to call you because of Carl Golden. And when I heard that she was on, I almost called you back and said, you see, I do have some influence.
Well, everybody, you know, success has many fathers. Failure is an orphan.
Right.
You know
I
that
was
thing.
going to take
you
credit
have no
for it,
idea how
Bob.
many people are calling me taking credit for getting Christy Whitman on the show. I, of course, had nothing to do with it.
But
and
congratulations anyway.
Thank you ever so much. I'm looking forward to coming in and doing the second half of this interview, which is you interviewing me.
That's right.
We'll do that next week, and then, of course, we'll tell people when the segment airs.
It's been fun, and thank you so much.
Thanks for coming in, and thank you, Dave, and thank you, Cindy. Nice to meet you. Coming up after the news, we'll talk with Art Zabrozny. I'm sorry, he's a spokesman for the Arco Chemical Company. We're going to talk about reformulated gasoline. Douglas Palmer, the mayor of Trenton, will be with us to talk about his call to increase penalties for making false reports involving race. And the mayor of Jersey City, Brett Schundler, will be with us after the 5:30 news. WCTC News Talk time is 3 o'clock. WCTC News is next.
Was there ever a subject you felt too hot to handle on your show?
I don't think so. There have been some subjects where I knew that I was going to take heat. For example, I mean, the polls will show you that 80% of the American public, 80% of the New Jersey public, for example, supports capital punishment. I don't. And so the first time I went on the air with it, and I think the first time I went on the air really strongly was when poor Gail Schaller was murdered. And I said, I know what's going to happen here. It's a brutal murder, and people are going to be calling for this guy to be publicly stripped and flayed. And I can understand that. And that's why well, I don't want to get into a whole discussion, but the point is that I came out on the air and said, you know, I know what this is going to lead to, and it's going to lead me into discussions of capital punishment, which I'm against. And people called me disbelief. How can you be against capital punishment? And that led me into the discussions. I was not a terribly strong supporter of the Gulf War. That was when I was doing the national show. And I felt that we had kind of rushed to judgment, but I also knew that most of the American public was going to be supportive, because for the most part they are supportive of those kinds of, you know, we had a bad guy, we had a villain in the piece, and
there was a lot of flag waving, and people got together.
Exactly.
And it was,
so you know you're going to take heat for things, and sometimes it's a lot easier. I mean, it would have been a lot easier for me just to go along and get along on those kinds of issues. But again, you know, it goes back to my thing. You can't try to please everybody every time. You wind up being bland, and you're being dishonest. So I just kind of go with myself, and I've changed my position on some things. And there are some issues on which this oxygenated gasoline thing, for example, is a perfect example of an issue. I agree with
it's
the last
my car,
guy,
which didn't start today.
Right. But you kind of, you know, you get one expert on who says, no, this stuff is fine and it's benign and it reduces the carbon monoxide. I'm not a scientist. You know, I believe a guy who tells me. I don't think a guy's going to get up and lie to me. Then I get two scientists who are telling me diametrically opposed things. Well, one of them is lying to me. So you got to kind of figure it out and hope that you're not, you know, simply buying into the guy who's got the best personality, because that can happen. So there aren't issues that I'm afraid to handle, but I know that there are issues that I'm going to take a lot of heat on, and I know that there are issues that I'm not really qualified to discuss. I'm not an economist. I don't know anything about NAFTA or GATT or any of those really complicated economic issues. I don't know how to analyze the budget. So when Christy Whitman puts forth this budget and says, I'm going to give everybody more money in their pocket, and I'm going to close the budget gap, and I'm going to increase the aid to the schools, I'm saying, hey, it looks pretty good to me, but I wait until the real economists come out and say, well, when she says this, she means this, and then I can do analysis of it. So sometimes there are issues that I feel are over my, you know, where I'm in over my head, and I feel a little diffident about taking them on.
Well, I don't know where the time has gone. Bob, it's like gone.
Yeah, well, I understand.
You know, it's been such fun, and it's been wonderful having you here. I've had such a ball.
I've enjoyed being here.
I hope you've had as good a time.
Ask me back again.
I certainly will. And to all of you out there, thank you so much for joining us once again. I'll see you all next month. In the meantime, take care.